A boy dared to walk up and touch the bull's magnificent horn, and what happened next silenced the entire crowd. What happens next will leave you speechless. Jacob's hands tightened against the wooden rail as the announcer's voice rang across the fairground. "Who among you dares?" the man shouted, his tone half mocking, half inviting, carrying easily over the noise of laughter and chatter. "Step forward! Prove your courage before the great Titan!" The crowd roared in response, some jeering, some urging others to volunteer, but not a single soul moved toward the pen. All eyes turned to the massive black bull pacing behind the fence. Titan's horns gleamed under the harsh midday sun, curving like sharpened blades, while his hooves struck the earth with a steady rhythm that echoed like distant thunder. His eyes, dark and restless, searched the crowd with a menace that made even seasoned farmers step back. The animal was power embodied, muscle and rage coiled into a beast that seemed untouchable. And then Jacob stepped forward. A murmur rippled through the gathered townsfolk. The skinny 14-year-old boy with dirt on his boots and hair in need of a combing looked entirely out of place among the strong-armed men who usually took such dares. His feet moved without his permission, carrying him through the crowd that parted around him with disbelief. Whispers rose on every side. "It's the Harlow boy. He'll be crushed. Where's his father? Stop him." But Jacob kept walking. His chest felt tight, each step heavier than the last, but he refused to turn back. He heard laughter behind him, sharp and mocking, yet it only pressed him forward. All he could see now was the gate, the thin barrier that separated him from Titan. His father's voice echoed in his head, a warning spoken long ago in the quiet of their barn. "Never get too close to a bull you don't know, Jacob. They'll kill you before you even know what's happening." Jacob swallowed hard, the memory mixing with the pounding of his heart. He was tired of being the boy who carried water buckets, the boy who fed chickens, the boy people ignored when real work or real courage was required. Today, with the eyes of the town upon him, he would no longer be invisible. He had only one plan: touch Titan's horn and walk away before fear claimed him. The announcer's booming voice broke through the tension. "A challenger steps forward." His tone had changed from mockery to surprise. "Young Jacob Harlow, come to test his courage." The crowd erupted in noise again, some cheering for the boy's bravery, others calling for him to stop before he got himself killed. Yet Jacob did not falter. He reached the gate, his hand trembling as it brushed against the iron latch. The scent of dust and hay filled his nose, but underneath it was something heavier, rawer. The musk of Titan's sweat, the smell of an animal that lived by its own laws, not man's. On the other side of the fence, Titan pawed at the ground, head lowered, as though already preparing for battle. Jacob froze for a moment, his breath shallow, legs unsteady. He felt the weight of the crowd pressing down on him, the fear of shame as sharp as the fear of being trampled. From the stands, his father's voice rang out. "Jacob, don't you dare!" The boy flinched but didn't turn. If he turned, he would stop, and if he stopped, he would never forgive himself. He tightened his grip on the latch and whispered under his breath, words his older brother had once spoken when they were alone in the fields. "Courage is not about strength. It's about what you dare to do when everyone else steps back." The gate creaked open. Gasps followed him as he slipped into the pen. The dirt crunched beneath his boots, and the world seemed to narrow until it was only him and Titan. The bull snorted, hot breath clouding the air, and stomped one massive hoof. The sound rattled Jacob's bones. "Steady now," Jacob murmured, his voice shaking though he tried to sound calm. His hands were open, palms out, showing he carried nothing. "I won't hurt you." The crowd had gone eerily silent, the kind of silence that carried the weight of held breath. Even the distant music of the fairground ride seemed to fade. Jacob took a step forward, then another. Every move felt like walking through water, slow and heavy, yet deliberate. He knew if he rushed, if he showed fear, Titan would sense it and strike. Somewhere behind him, voices hissed. "This is madness." "He's just a boy." But another voice cut low, so low only a few nearby could hear. Rowan Blackwood, the fair's organizer, leaned close to his assistant, his sharp eyes fixed on the boy. His lips curved in a smile that did not reach his eyes as he whispered, "If the boy pulls this off, it will ruin everything." The words vanished into the air, unheard by the crowd, unnoticed by Jacob, but they hung like a shadow over the pen, unseen yet full of promise. Jacob took another step. Titan's ears twitched, his massive body shifting, but he did not charge. The boy's heart thundered in his chest, fear and determination locked in a battle as fierce as any fight in the ring. He was close enough now to see the wet sheen on the bull's horns, close enough to hear the steady huff of breath, close enough to feel that this moment would decide not only how the crowd saw him, but how he saw himself. And still, he moved closer. Jacob stepped into the pen, the gate closing with a metallic clang that echoed louder than any cheer from the stands. Titan snorted, the sound deep and guttural, a blast of air that carried the weight of warning. The bull's massive head lowered, horns glinting in the sun, and the movement alone made grown men in the front row clutch their hats against their chests. Others leaned forward, jaws clenched, waiting for the inevitable. Jacob's knees nearly buckled. His legs felt as if they had turned to sand, loose and heavy beneath him, every step a struggle against the trembling in his bones. But he moved forward anyway, slowly, carefully, each motion deliberate. His hands were raised, palms open, fingers spread. The gesture wasn't just for the bull, it was for himself, a reminder that he wasn't armed, that he wasn't there to fight. He wanted Titan to see him, not as a threat, but as a boy standing with nothing but his will. The silence around him thickened. The fairground, usually a flood of sound, seemed strangled. The creak of wagon wheels stopped, the barking of vendors ceased, even the wind stilled as if nature itself waited. Jacob could feel the eyes of the entire town pressed against his back, their disbelief, their fear, their curiosity. But louder than all of it was the voice in his head. Don't run. If you run, you'll never stop him. If you stand, you might just have a chance. Titan pawed the dirt, tearing furrows in the earth. Dust rose and drifted in the air like smoke. Jacob inhaled the taste of it, dry and bitter, clinging to his throat. His voice came out low, hardly more than a whisper, but he spoke anyway, words slipping out like a prayer. Easy. I'm not here to hurt you. The bull's ears twitched at the sound, his head jerking slightly as if listening. Jacob's heart raced, hammering hard against his chest, but he forced his breathing steady, each inhale sharp, each exhale controlled. He couldn't let Titan sense his fear, not too much of it at least. Animals could smell weakness. His father had said so, and Jacob believed it. What Jacob didn't know was that in the shadows near the far side of the pen, Rowan Blackwood lifted one hand. The organizer's sharp eyes never left the boy, but his lips pressed into a thin line, unreadable to most. His assistant, leaning in close, muttered nervously, "Are you certain about this?" Rowan didn't glance at him. His voice was calm, but cold. "Wait for the signal." Two men crouched near the rails, half hidden from the crowd's view, their hands gripping long wooden goads tipped with sharp iron. Their knuckles whitened, sweat gleamed on their brows, but they obeyed, their eyes flicking between Rowan's poised hand and the beast that paced before them. They knew the plan. No matter what courage the boy showed, Titan would be made to seem uncontrollable. The crowd would see only danger. And when fear was strongest, Rowan would be ready to sell the bull to men who craved violence for profit. Jacob, unaware of the trap closing around him, took another step. Now he was so close he could see the shifting muscles beneath Titan's black hide, each ripple of flesh a reminder of power that could crush him in an instant. The bull's breath came in slow bursts, clouds of heat rising from his nostrils. Jacob stared into Titan's eyes, dark, unblinking, full of something more than rage. There was intelligence there, a restless searching, a storm behind the gaze that mirrored the one inside Jacob's chest. And then, unexpectedly, Titan stopped. The massive head rose slightly. The stomping ceased. The crowd held its breath, stunned into silence. Jacob froze, one hand hovering in the air, caught between courage and fear. He didn't know why the bull had stopped, but he understood that stillness mattered. It was a chance. The boy's fingers trembled, sweat slicking his palms, but he reached forward. Inch by inch, he closed the space between them until his hand brushed against Titan's horn. The horn was warm, smoother than he expected, solid as stone beneath his fingertips. Gasps burst from the crowd. The silence shattered. Men shouted, voices breaking into disbelief. "He touched it!" Boys cheered, their high-pitched cries echoing against the wooden stands. Old farmers removed their hats, shaking their heads in awe, muttering words of respect. For a heartbeat, the world was still again, Jacob's hand on the horn, Titan standing calm, and the crowd stunned by what they saw. The boy's chest swelled with something unfamiliar, something stronger than pride. He had done it. He had touched Titan and lived. But then Rowan's hand dropped. The man beside the pen moved quick as a strike, thrusting the iron tip of his goad into Titan's flank. The jab was sharp, cruel, designed not to wound but to enrage. Titan roared, the sound violent and terrible, shaking the very air. His muscles surged, his body twisting with fury. The earth exploded under his hooves as he lashed out, kicking up dirt in a storm. Jacob was thrown back by the sheer force of movement, stumbling, his feet scrambling for balance. Titan's head swung, the horn slicing through the space where the boy had stood a heartbeat earlier. Dust stung Jacob's eyes as he crashed onto one knee, his breath ripped from his chest. The crowd's awe turned instantly into chaos. Shouts filled the air, shrill cries of fear rising above the deeper bellows of men. Mothers clutched their sons, fathers yelled warnings, boots thundered against wooden planks as people scrambled to higher ground. Jacob blinked through the haze, his chest heaving. He could feel the vibration of Titan's fury through the ground itself. But in the blur of panic, he saw what no one else noticed. The shadow of a man pulling back from the pen, goad in hand, guilt flashing across his face before he slipped into the crowd. And in that instant, Jacob understood. This was no accident. The fairground exploded into chaos. Titan thundered across the dirt, his massive frame colliding with the wooden rails of the pen. The fence shuddered, the boards groaning as men in the front row stumbled back, scrambling over benches to avoid the sharp ends of his horns. Screams cut through the hot afternoon air, mixing with the deep bellow of the beast. Dust rose in clouds, choking the space between the animal and the terrified onlookers. Jacob clung to the railing, his fingers digging into the splintered wood, his chest heaving with every frantic breath. His mind raced faster than his heartbeat. He had seen the shadow, the thrust of the goad, the cruelty behind the sudden storm. Someone wanted Titan to appear uncontrollable. Someone wanted him, Jacob Harlow, broken or dead in front of everyone. The realization should have frozen him with fear, but instead it hardened into something else. Resolve. If he did nothing, Titan would destroy everything, and the lie would be written as truth. But if he acted, if he could calm the bull, maybe he could show the crowd what really happened. Jacob dropped back into the pen. Gasps erupted. "He's gone mad!" someone shouted, the words shrill with disbelief. Men tried to pull him back through the rails, but he slipped free, planting his boots firmly into the dirt. His body trembled, yet he forced himself to stand straight, arms wide as if to shield the very beast others fled from. The dust stung his eyes, and the heat pressed down on his skin, but his focus was locked on Titan. The bull wheeled, his great head swinging, nostrils flaring, hooves tearing deep grooves into the ground. His rage was not blind, Jacob realized. It was searching. The beast wasn't aiming for him. Titan's fury burned at something else, the hidden hands that had jabbed him. Jacob steadied his voice, though fear crawled inside his throat. "It's not me, is it?" he said softly, speaking to the bull as though speaking to a man. He raised his arms higher, palms outward, every gesture deliberate, calm. "You know it's them." The crowd roared with confusion. To them, it looked like a boy begging for his life, a foolish child talking to a beast that could not understand. But Titan slowed. His pounding hooves stilled, his head shook once, violently, sending strings of saliva into the air. His sides heaved, muscles tense as if torn between trust and rage. Every second stretched, heavy as an hour. The audience leaned forward, breathless, waiting for the boy to be gored or trampled. Fathers clutched their sons, men muttered prayers under their breath. And then, Titan chose. The bull turned sharply, his massive body moving with terrifying speed. But not toward Jacob. The animal thundered across the pen, straight at the men with the goads. The first never had time to dodge. Titan's horn caught him in the chest, throwing him backward into the dirt with a cry that cut off sharp. The second scrambled, eyes wide with horror, and leapt for the fence, barely clearing the rail as the bull crashed beneath him. The impact shook the structure, splinters flying into the air. The crowd erupted in shock, shouts mixing with outrage. "What's happening? Why's he after them? Who touched him?" From the stands, fathers shouted for justice, their voices cutting through the mayhem. "They provoked him. I saw it. The bull wasn't at fault." Faces turned toward Rowan Blackwood, the organizer standing near the edge of the arena. His jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with something dark. But when he stepped forward, his expression was calm, almost rehearsed. He spread his arms as though to quiet the crowd. "People of Ashford," Rowan called, his tone smooth, carrying authority. "This is what happens when a reckless boy meddles with forces beyond him. The beast is dangerous. He gestured toward the pen. "This chaos was born of foolishness." But his words did not silence everyone. Some men in the front row shouted back, "No, the boy had him calm. It wasn't Jacob. The bull went for the ones who struck him." Jacob's chest pounded as he stood within the pen, dust swirling around his small frame. His eyes never left Rowan's face, and in that instant, he saw it. A flicker of fear. Not fear of the bull, fear of the truth. Jacob's objective shifted like a stone rolling down a hill. It was no longer just about surviving, no longer just about touching the horn. It was about proving what he had seen, about showing the people of Ashford that Titan had been betrayed. He clenched his fists, his voice barely audible over the roar of the crowd. "I won't let you bury this." Titan circled the pen, still snorting, his rage not fully spent. Dust hung in the air, broken boards leaned where the fence had splintered, and the crowd stood divided. some trembling in fear, others crying for answers. Rowan held his mask of control, but Jacob knew better now. The truth had slipped into the open, if only for a moment. And with Titan's help, he had a chance to drag it fully into the light. But the fairground was no longer a place of games. It had turned into a battleground, and Jacob understood with a sinking weight that one wrong move. By the next morning, the story had already taken on a life of its own. The streets of Ashford buzzed with restless energy, whispers running through alleyways and across tavern tables like sparks leaping from dry tinder. At the break of dawn, men gathered at the mill, their voices low but urgent, repeating what they had heard from those who were present the night before. "They say the boy stood before Titan without a hint of fear," one man muttered, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of ale. "And Rowan's men, did you hear? They had goads, sharp ones. Used them to rile the beast," another replied, shaking his head in disbelief. By mid-morning, the tavern was packed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with the scent of pipe smoke and sweat. Some spoke of Titan's fury, but most focused on Jacob, the boy who had stepped forward when grown men had shrunk back. They spoke of his steadiness, his words, and the way the bull had lowered its head as though listening. To the older farmers, men hardened by years of toil and skepticism, Jacob had revealed a truth none of them wanted to admit. Courage was not measured by age or size, but by heart. At the fairground, where the earth was still scarred from hooves and broken fences, investigators from the county arrived. They were stern men in long coats, their boots crunching over the trampled dirt as they inspected the grounds. Titan, held steady by two ranchers, shifted uneasily as one of the officials ran his hand along the bull's broad side. Then the marks were found, long raised welts where Rowan's men had jabbed him. The lead investigator lifted his voice so all nearby could hear. "These are no accidents. The bull was goaded deliberately. The boy's testimony is confirmed." A ripple went through the crowd. Some gasped, others muttered curses under their breath, all of it aimed at Rowan. The man himself was nowhere to be seen. His grand reputation, the one he had so carefully constructed over years, collapsed in an instant under the weight of evidence. Jacob stood at the edge of the gathering, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the ground. Men who once doubted him now approached with heavy steps and extended hands. "You did right, boy," said one farmer, his grip rough but sincere as he clapped Jacob on the shoulder. "You showed more sense than half of us." Jacob managed a nod, though unease pressed heavily on his chest. He had never sought the eyes of the town. He only wanted to stand for what he believed was true, just once. Now he was caught in the storm that truth had unleashed. As the county officials turned their attention to Rowan's dealings, more revelations came to light. Behind closed doors, it was whispered that Rowan had engaged in fraud, hiding debts and selling stock under false claims. His underground trades, once rumors, were now uncovered in the daylight. Every step he had taken to appear untouchable only served to deepen his disgrace. The bull, Titan, was spared. Rather than being sold off as Rowan had planned, he was entrusted to ranchers whose care was beyond question. From that moment, Titan was no longer seen as a danger, but as a living symbol of Ashford's pride, wild, powerful, but not cruel. Days passed, but Jacob's life did not return to what it once was. Men who had scowled at him now called out greetings as he walked through town. Children ran to him in groups, tugging at his sleeves, their voices bright with questions. "Tell us, Jacob, how close did you stand?" one boy asked eagerly. "Was Titan's breath hot on your face?" another chimed in. Jacob forced a small smile. "Closer than most would dare," he answered softly, but the words felt heavy. The older men shook his hand, gripping it firmly as though sealing their respect. "You've given us something to think about," one remarked, his weathered face earnest. "Don't ever forget that." Yet Jacob could not shake the weight pressing against him. Each cheer, each handshake, reminded him of a truth he could not escape. He had uncovered something dangerous. Rowan's men had been willing to risk lives to keep their secrets hidden. And though Rowan had fallen, Jacob feared that not everyone involved would accept defeat so easily. Shadows lingered even as the town celebrated. 1 week later, the harvest parade filled Ashford's streets with color and sound. Flags hung from windows, carts rolled past carrying crops, and musicians played lively tunes. But all noise seemed to fade when Titan appeared. The bull, massive and steady, walked through the street with a calm that stunned the crowd into silence. His black hide shone in the sunlight, his horns gleaming like polished ivory. At his side walked Jacob, a simple rope in his hand, though it was clear the rope was not needed. Titan matched his stride to the boys as if an unspoken bond tied them together. The people who had once laughed at Jacob, doubted him, or turned away in disbelief now stood in reverent quiet. Some bowed their heads, others placed hands over their hearts. The moment was not about spectacle or fear. It was about truth. Jacob's heart thudded in his chest as he walked. He could feel Titan's steady presence beside him, the ground trembling faintly with each step the bull took. The silence of the crowd pressed in, but it was not mocking this time. It was awe. And as the parade turned down the main street, Jacob understood. He had not only touched the bull's horn that night, he had touched something deeper, something that cut through fear, lies, and power. The truth had been dragged into the open, and it was that truth, not Titan's strength nor his own courage, that had silenced them all. Jacob had touched the bull's horn, but in doing so, he had touched the truth, and that truth silenced the crowd. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores themes of courage, unexpected connections, and the profound bonds that can form between humans and animals. This narrative aims to highlight the importance of trust and to inspire a deeper appreciation for the loyal friends found in the most unlikely of places.